what were some of the most challenging and some of the most rewarding moments through the last few years of scaling Interview Kickstart?
Yeah, sorry, before I come to that, what I was going to say early on is there is a place for universities, right? But the time, see, universities came up around the industrial uh, revolution, right? That's when they really started scaling. And I mean, they existed even before that, the Cambridges and the Oxfords of the world. But the reason why, so universities definitely have a place, but the reason why universities struggle, in particular when it comes to tech, is the half-life of a lot of tech is a year, less than a year. I mean, look at AI. Every couple of quarters, there's a new GPT, or there's a new Claude, or there's a new Gemini.
Yeah.
And so universities are not built, they're not designed to keep up with that pace of change, which is why there is a place for universities. But if you want, especially in tech, if you want to keep up with the latest and the greatest changes that are abound, it is very difficult to do so
Mm-hmm.
in universities, and that's kind of why we exist. But to get to your point, well, what are some of the most rewarding moments and the most challenging moments? I think usually they all center around the customer, right? The most rewarding moments and the most challenging moments, they always center around your customers. Obviously there are other challenges, um, but let's start with the most rewarding moments, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think personally for me, when you see people who come through what you are offering and they fundamentally transform, that is always the most rewarding, right? Let me give you a specific example of what this looks like. What's the human story behind this? And I'll give you two examples. One of our students, right, he had failed 13 interviews.
Mm-hmm.
He had applied everywhere: Amazon, Google, Facebook, Uber, Airbnb, LinkedIn, all of this. And he had kind of thought to himself that he's never going to make it. Obviously failed 13 times, right? A friend of his recommended him the Interview Kickstart program. And that is how we get most people. Most people come through us through some sort of word of mouth recommendation. That's how we know the business has legs, right? When people recommend that, otherwise acquisition costs are too much. He came to the program, very committed, finished the program, did the classes, mock interviews, then decided that he's going to interview. The first company he interviewed at was Amazon in AWS, which is one of the companies he had failed
Mm-hmm.
earlier. And in his first interview, he sailed through, doubled his comp, right? Now, that is something that really makes you, gives you a nice warm, fuzzy feeling, because you realize you've fundamentally transformed that person. And by virtue of that, Priyanka, what we've noticed is when a person fundamentally, and I'm sure, you with your experience at Meta would know, these companies, they transform your life. They pay much more, your compensation is much more, and you get to do cutting edge work. And so if you have a family, right, you like, what do you do with that increment in compensation? You go to a better house, you give your kids a better education, maybe you travel. So it's multi-generational, right? The impact is multi-generational, and you become an example for your kids that, hey, my mom or my dad is somebody who's doing really well, and you kind of become a role model. So clearly, I think all the greatest moments around company building for me are around customer transformation, right? That is when you see the fruit of your labor, and especially when people write to you and they tell you their story, right? The second example I want to give you is what something that is very close to me. There is one of our learners. She struggled massively with interview anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Smart, very smart, very capable. But she just fundamentally struggled with interview anxiety, right? Now, interviews are a very challenging construct because they're completely atypical from what you do in your day job. They're like pressure cooker situations, right? And especially in tech, where the size of the prize is so high, and so interview anxiety is quite common. Now, in her case, because of the interview anxiety, she didn't interview anywhere. She said, "I'm just not going to put myself into this position." And so the first job she got, she just continued to prod and move forward. And then again, through a recommendation, somebody told her, "Hey, you know what? You should give this a shot." She came, she did the program, again, very committed, followed the pathway that we laid, finished the program, applied. She had a couple of interviews where it didn't go well, but she kept working with the coaches. Eventually, she got an engineering manager role at one of the FANG companies, right? And when you talk to her, her feedback is very interesting. She says, yes, I got a much better role, better comp, all of that was great. But she said, this process has fundamentally transformed me as a human being. I no longer get anxiety because I know that if I put in the work,
Right.
I can overcome anxiety as I did in the interview process. So clearly, customers and stuff that is around customers is ultimately what drives you. And there also lie the challenges, right? Now, when you scale, one of the things you have to do as a business owner is you have to put in place processes, right? And invariably, what happens, Priyanka, is every time you hit the next degree of scale, some process breaks, right? And so there's going to be some customer complaint or the other that you have to deal with. And let me tell you a funny incident, right? Just to show you that you cannot predict where irate customers are going to come from. Now, this is before we scaled and did this remotely. We used to have in-person sessions in Sunnyvale, right? And I get this email one day from a really irate customer. And the customer says, Ryan, I'm really upset with a change that you guys have made. I think this is fundamentally unacceptable. He doesn't tell me what the change is. And so I want to meet you after tonight's class and have a chat. Like, oh, this guy sounds really, upset, wondering what's going on. So we changed curriculum, we changed instructors. All the class ratings are amazing. I had a very important event that evening, which I canceled because I was like, okay, I want to go and try and understand what's troubling this customer. And I get there, and I kid you not, his complaint was over the last 2 weeks, when you served dinner to us, which is something that we used to do just to keep people engaged, you have stopped serving butter. And that was the complaint.
Wow.
So the truth is, it really does matter which side you butter your bread, right? And that was a complaint. And the reason I picked a very flippant complaint is when you scale, you never know where the customer challenges are going to come. It could come from something as inconsequential as, hey, you didn't give me butter. Now, the customer at that point is not thinking that I have not paid for dinner. Dinner is something that we provide because we didn't want people to get distracted. We didn't want people to leave and come back and miss. And so we said, let's do this. But the fact that we didn't give dinner the fact that we provided dinner was not appreciated. The fact that we didn't give butter was caught, right?